Have you ever used a ground blind for bear hunting? I have, and I'll tell you what, there's some significant pros and cons of using a ground blind for baiting bears. And I'm going to go through these. I actually got my cheat sheet here because I got 6 of each pros and cons, and I'm getting older. It's getting hard to remember stuff, so I made some notes here. I hope you don't mind. Normally I try not to do this, but let's just go through some of the pros and cons and talk about the advantages and disadvantages of using a ground blind. Well, the first pro, of course, is a concealment factor. I mean, you can get back in one of these, and if you're wearing dark clothes, you can be pretty well hidden from the bears. So that's a big one. The scent containment issue is also a pretty big one, that you can pretty well keep your scent within the ground blind, whether you're using some kind of a scent control device in there with you or not. You can protect your scent from spreading around the area, and that's a big advantage. So another big advantage is you can stretch and move about. You got a little room in there. You got a nice comfortable chair. You can stick your legs out and relax, try to stay awake and so forth. It gives you a little bit of elbow room that's pretty convenient and comfortable if you got a good chair. Of course, being a bow hunter, I have to draw a bow to shoot, and that movement has saved the lives of a lot of bears for bow hunters. So keep that in mind, that the protection from them seeing you move to draw your bow is also a big one. They're quick, they're easy to set up. You can pop one up. These pop-up ground blinds, man, you can put one up in just a few minutes and be ready to hunt. So there's more about that on the con side, but another big one is bug control. You know, if you light a thermocell in there with you, you're going to want to keep a couple of windows open to keep a little bit of air circulation going through. Otherwise, the smell of that thermocell is going to choke you off. But the reality is, if you got a thermocell, even if you're turning it off and on from time to time, you're just not going to have any mosquitoes in there with you. So that's also a big advantage. So the cons are some big ones as well. Here's one of the big ones. When you're sitting on the ground and something like that, you have limited protection from aggressive bears, whether it's a sow with cubs, and bears are curious. They're going to come check out the ground blind, okay? And if a cub comes over there and starts sniffing around, and a sow happens to see movement in there, you could be in a dicey situation. Some of the larger males can be pretty aggressive too, so you know, that's one of the negatives, okay? And as I said, the bears are curious. They're gonna come over and check it out. It takes some time for them to get used to it. If you set it up a week or two ahead of time and you brush it in pretty good, by the time you're hunting, then they probably won't be you know, over there nosing around it, because they've already done that. But they are curious, and so keep that in mind. It takes, like I said, sometimes a couple of days for them to settle down and ignore it. Sometimes some bears just never do. They just have to go and check it out every time they come to the bait. Here's the other real con for me, is I like to see when the bears are coming so I can prepare for a shot. And when you're up in a tree stand, you're above the cover, you can see a bear coming a lot sooner than you can when you're enclosed on the blind. And in order to block out light, you got to have most of the windows closed in the blind, so you kind of got tunnel vision. You don't know what's going on behind you. I've had a bear walk up and start sniffing just inches from me on the back of the ground blind, and I couldn't see him. The only reason I knew he was there is because I could hear him sniffing. So that's a pretty big one for me, but not the biggest. I'll get to the biggest here in a minute. Are the pins on your bow sight. It's really hard to see them inside of a ground blind as the sun starts to go down. Now, if you're in a tree stand, you can see your pins pretty well right up until 30 minutes after sunset, which is where legal shooting light ends in most states and provinces. When you're in a ground blind, you could cut that off by as much as 15 minutes, especially if it's an overcast day. That can be an issue, is being able to have enough light to gather to the fiber optics on your pins, and you won't be able to see your sight pins as long in a ground blind. And then the biggest one of all, which is kind of a deal breaker for me, the reason why I hardly ever use a ground blind, and that is the path of your arrow. If you're hunting with a firearm, this is not an issue, but if you're hunting with a bow, you want a low exit wound. Bears have a really thick fur, and a heavy layer of fat, and you can shoot an arrow right through a bear, both lungs, and that bear might only run 50 or 75 yards, but if you don't have an exit wound that's lower on their body, you can have a really difficult time finding that bear because you're just not going to have a blood trail. I've shot arrows from the ground through bears where they literally did not leave a single drop of blood, even though they just all bled out inside. So bears typically don't run that far if they're shot well, but you know, you're hunting in really thick cover, and it's really difficult to find them at times. So those are some of the cons. So it's a trade-off. There's places where you can't find a tree that's big enough to put a tree stand in, so sometimes you're going to be limited to a ground blind, and there's other situations where it might be the best tool for the job. But anyway, I've given you some things to think about. If you can think of another pro or con, we'd be happy to read the comments about it. If you'd like to put something about it in the comment section below, please hit the like button. It really helps me out. And if you're not a subscriber, you're really missing out, because this is the #1 bear hunting channel on YouTube. And if you're a bear hunter, you need to be a subscriber. So we will talk to you on the next video.